Happy October, everyone. Welcome to September's Q&A. Yep, that's right. As is tradition, I do the Q&A a month late. So this Q&A has been sponsored to you by everyone on Patreon. So thank you, my patrons. And if you'd like to support on Patreon, go to patreon.com/lifewheremfrom. So let's get into it. And today's topic is Kyushoku, which is the Japanese school lunch program, which I did a documentary on, or a mini documentary. So if you haven't seen that, maybe check that out first and then come back, because I'll probably have answered a lot of those questions, or a lot of questions you might have had in that video. So I tried to choose questions that have not been answered in that video, mostly. Okay, so first, from one of my patrons, Sarah Louise, your question is, "Hi Greg, rather curious. Do any of the kids take their own lunch to school? Or do the schools provide lunches for all students? How do school lunches compare in Canada versus Japan? Which one do Aiko and Shin prefer? Japanese lunches or Canadian school lunches? Do students pay for their lunches or are they free of charge?" Okay, that's a lot of questions. I didn't realize this. Okay, so do any of the kids take their own lunch to school? In general, no, but as I'll explain later, it can be done, but generally no. Do the school provide lunches for all students? Yes, all students, all staff, the teachers, everyone generally eats the same lunch. How do they compare Canada versus Japan? Well, in most public elementary schools that I know of in Canada, students bring their own lunch. So it's really hard to compare, because in Japan, if you saw the video, it's done in a kitchen in-house or in a central kitchen that is still with fresh ingredients, and is provided to everyone the exact same meal. So in general, the exact same meal. So I don't know. It's which one do Aiko and Shin prefer? I think they said they preferred the Japanese system, because there is quite a lot of variety in comparison to the Canadian system. And do students pay for their lunches, or are they free of charge? So students do pay for lunches. So how it works is the government pays for the facilities, for the staff, and the parents pay for the ingredients. And if the parents can't afford it, they're low income, then there are subsidies that can pay for the lunches for them. So everybody should be able to eat lunch. Yeah. All right, so these are from YouTube. One of the most common comments was about uniforms, and people wondered why the students weren't wearing uniforms. So in public elementary schools, for the most part, uniforms aren't worn at the elementary school level. So that's like grade 1 to grade 6. Now, in certain wards, like I believe it's Minato or maybe Chuo, in Tokyo, they do have uniforms for the school system, but in most other ones they don't. And if you're going to private or international school, then their standards may be different. Private, I think you're much more likely to have uniforms at the elementary school level. Now, once you hit middle school, which would be the equivalent of American or Canadian schools of 7, 8, 9 grades, then you would be wearing uniforms in general across the board. And then in high school, the same thing. So grades 10, 11, 12, probably you're wearing a uniform. All right, masks. Now, I mostly answered this in my Weird Japan video. Why do people wear masks, or why are the students wearing masks? And it's mostly to protect from the transmission of germs. That's why they do it. So it's more for the servers that are going to be wearing masks, and obviously the food preparers in the kitchen. But for the students eating food, they don't need to be wearing masks. It might have been just it's the personal preference of the student whether or not they want to wear a mask. It's a very popular thing. So go check the Weird Japan video if you want to know a little bit more about masks. Okay. And just something that I found in YouTube comments, some other people's experiences, is that not every single school is exactly like the one I've shown. Of course, it is a national law, but schools and school districts, they can choose how to implement that law. So it can vary. And some schools, maybe they're really, really tiny, so they don't do it quite all in-house. Or some schools, they might share a central kitchen where 5 schools will be served by one kitchen. So that can happen as well. And if you hear a meow, 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 that's my cat outside who's trying to get in. Aw, kitty, poor kitty. Okay, maybe I'll let her in. Hold on. Okay, what do you want? Okay, so this is cat A, I believe. Meow? Yeah, what do you want to do? She'll just sit beside me and monitor my Q&A. And maybe meow a lot at me as well. Okay, alright, so I also took questions from people on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So here's one from Twitter. What values do you think Kyushoku gives children at this age? Do you see a difference between that and Canada's lunch system? The values, it's quite a few, I think, actually. Just one is exposure to a lot of different types of ingredients, whether it's fresh vegetables, just different styles of food. So I think it gets students more accustomed to eating healthy food, a variety of food. In terms of appreciating the food, I think that's also quite in there, where they say itadakimasu before they eat, and gochisousama deshita when they're done eating, like thanking everyone for the food. They also have to wait until everyone is served before they all eat their food, so that kind of, group respect for everyone. I don't know what my kitty wants. And also the cleaning aspect and the serving aspect, like everyone's working as a team together, everyone's responsible. So, and even the teachers and the principal, the staff, they're all eating the same food, so everyone's the same kind of. So I like that part about it. All right, and that was from Shell on Twitter. On Facebook, Christina Church. How long are school lunches provided? And she said, as most animes show, high school students provide their own. Is it only primary that provides school lunches? So elementary, I think it was like something like 99% of public elementary schools have Kyushoku. Once you get to the junior high level, it's still very, very high, but the number lowers a bit. And then once you get to high school, it's pretty much people bring their own lunch, or they have cafeterias or some type of combination, depending on the school. So the animes are not wrong when you're talking about the high school level. All right. Robert Weller. Do parents' children have any input regarding the meal plan? This one I didn't specifically ask a nutritionist. I know they put out the menus and the PTA and parents can give feedback in, so I think to some extent, yes, they can influence it, but my gut feeling is, in practical terms, it's really, the nutritionist who is coming up with the menu based on, and they're basing their feedback based on how the students are reacting, and maybe a bit on how the parents are reacting. But I think in general, parents in Japan kind of put more, trust in what the teachers of the schools would be doing, and our acceptance of what they're doing, and saying, okay, well, this is how the school's doing it, we just got to live with it. I think there's more of that than in, say, Canada or the United States. All right, so Chang Hua Chao, and I probably didn't pronounce it right. Where does the cultural attention and care for food come from? Kyushoku not only provides nutrition to the children, but also teaches them to appreciate the food they eat, but it has to come from somewhere. Can it be found in Japanese history, or is it something more from Shinto or Buddhism? That is a very good question, and I honestly don't have any good answer for you about that. I know it's not a long-standing thing, Kyushoku, like school lunch. It's only something that started in the 1890s, and really it was kind of like hodgepodge until after World War II, where it was like really started to get going. So that type of widespread school lunch thing, it's recent times. In terms of appreciation for food, yeah, maybe that goes back a lot longer. I'm not too sure how far back that would go and how it was back then. I haven't studied that or researched that. All right, so this one is from Sarah McNairland Barak. What is the jelly like for the dessert birthday treat? Is it like jelly you would put on toast, or is it more like Jell-O? It's more like Jell-O, but it's more like Jell-O, but it's not Jell-O. It's different. It's a good jelly. It's a good jelly. Yeah. Luku Pisan. How long is school lunch period? in the US or my schools is it is 35 minutes in and out. Oh boy, that is a good question, and I would totally know if I would have looked at my time codes. I thought I knew this. I'm going with just shy of an hour is what I believe happened. Because the eating time is different than like once the bell rings, then they go get the food and they rearrange the classroom. They do they serve, they do the thanks, they eat, then they do the cleanup and all that kind of stuff. Altogether, I believe it's under an hour, but definitely more than 30 minutes. How about let's go with that? All right, Dane from Patreon. Fantastic video, Greg. One of my favorites so far. Thank you. Here's what I was wondering while watching the video. You briefly talked about how some children get special meals for allergy reasons. I was wondering if Japanese schools are also accommodating to special meal requests for moral religious reasons. For example, vegetarian or kosher. If the school is accommodating, are there social ramifications for the children since they stand out every meal? Bullying or shaming maybe? Okay, so that is that's a pretty big question. Yeah, and I have a pretty big answer. And so we called up a nutritionist that we know of that recently retired, someone in the family, and asked them the question, what would happen? And so let me just put this out first, is that each school district can have a different official policy. So some school districts have more, let's just say, foreigners than others. So foreigners would have different diets because the nutritionist, the family member we were talking to, said like 30 years ago, pretty much everybody had the same diet. So having special diets wasn't really a consideration for, like I said, like religious or vegetarian moral reasons. Allergy-wise, it's definitely... they take a lot of care. So generally how the allergy works is you provide a medical certificate on a yearly basis. Then you would have a talk probably with the nutritionist and the teacher, your homeroom teacher, and just hash that out. And then as a nutritionist is planning meals, they make sure that the student is accommodated. So meals can be designed to take into account things that can be easily substituted or taken out or switched out. To be flexible. So they do have that in mind when they're making meals, the nutritionists. Now, you could also eat more of a certain dish. So if you didn't want to eat the protein, or if you're lactose intolerant, then you could have more. And you'll see that they do, measure out how much food to give all the students, but there can be some left over, and then you can have okawari, which is seconds, and get more of that. So that could happen in that case. Now you're talking about, let's say, for religious reasons, you don't want to eat pork, or for vegetarian reasons, you don't want to eat any meat, so you wouldn't eat the chicken. They could substitute that out at some point of the cooking process to put in chicken or maybe tofu or something. So that can happen. And that really boils down to, again, the school district level and maybe even the school and the nutritionist level on how they want to accommodate that. Are there social impacts? Yeah, because a lot of Japan is predicated on like being the same. So whether it's the schools or the workplaces or the teams, everyone's supposed to be equal and the same. So you do stand out if you have a different type of diet. I think there's a lot more acceptance nowadays, though, and a lot more understanding than there used to be. There's, the more foreigners you have, the more people get used to the idea of, things are done in different ways in different places, and people have different beliefs and diets and whatnot. So I think there's a lot more tolerance, but one thing I've heard some schools do is if the diet was, like, say, extremely complicated or too hard for the school to pull off, then an option could present itself that the parents could, or the students could bring their own lunch to the school. So that can happen. Bring their own bento, which is like school lunch, or not school lunch, lunch box. But you might put it into the same dishes that the other students are using to kind of, fit in more and not be as different. So generally, I think students wouldn't want to do that. And I know of a personal case, not my kids, but somebody we know that they were vegetarian and they were able to negotiate something with the school where they could bring their own lunch, and the student didn't like that at all. He didn't like being different. So, yeah, that is a thing. Um, yeah, so another thing is if you are really keen on having a different diet and having more control over what the school does, I think private and international, you're going to have an easier time than in the public school system. And of course, it depends on which district you're in and what school you're in, really. So it's not a completely everyone has to do the same thing across the board type of deal in Japan. So that's what some people wonder, like, could you pull this off in other countries? And I think it would be hard, but it's not like it's 100% the same in Japan. There is room for flexibility. Okay, on Instagram, we have a lot of questions, but I think we have a lot of quick answers as well. Okay, so woke Lianza, you're woke. Do you get to choose between foods for lunch? No, you have the same set of food. That's it. Yeah. Uh, Jaya papaya. Okay, what do they do with the leftovers? Well, yeah, people can eat the leftovers, and they can do like janken poi, which is rock paper scissors. If there's some hotly contested items, like maybe that ginger chicken's really good, so if more than one person wants it, they'll play the game for it. Um, and maybe some people could take it home, like some of the staff members or whatnot, if there was extra. But I think the nutritionist, it's part of their job to look, is there leftovers on these days? Is it because people didn't like the food? Is it because we made too much? This and that. So I think they constantly tailor the meals so there's not a lot of food wastage. And that's something I didn't mention in the video, but I think it's a really low. The amount of food wastage is like below 5% or something like that. They've done a really good job, at least in the Adachi school system. Okay, Lila Botka Bay 21. Okay, do they have to eat what is given? Can they have soda or cake with their meal? They don't have to eat what is given. Maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, they did. They don't, but you can't bring in your own stuff. No. In general, especially not something like soda or cake. As explained before, for special circumstances you could, but not something frivolous like snacks. All right, is male Amar? Is there ever a day where they eat a foreign food? Actually, it's very often they have foreign food. So if you look at the video, one of the meals was more of a Western inspired meal. I think it had, there was I want to say pasta gratin maybe. Actually, that's potatoes. There was cheese. I don't know. It was a Western meal. It had like bread too and stuff like that. They do meals from different places. It's not just totally Japanese, but it could be like a Japanese take on a Western meal. Yeah. So, what are Shin and Aiko's favorite Kyushoku? Is it the only eating time in Japanese schools? I don't actually know their favorite Kyushoku, and I forgot to ask them. I'm sorry. But I do know that Aiko said she likes her elementary school Kyushoku better than her middle school's Kyushoku. So depending on the school you are and the nutritionist and the staff, the quality and the taste of the food can change. So it really depends what school you're in. And yes, that is the only official eating time in school. There are no snacks. It's just lunchtime. All right, Abby Kugler. Why do they have kids serve the food instead of adults like they do in America? I think it's just to teach the responsibility of doing it. So I don't think there's any other reason beyond that. I mean, kids clean their own schools too, and they take a lot more responsibility for stuff in Japanese schools at a younger age than in Canadian or American schools that I've seen. So, yeah, responsibility, folks. Julia Konoraka. What do kids eat on a school trip? Good question. They would eat a bento, like lunch box that their parents would make. And this is where, if you see like those really fancy bento boxes and the nice cute little designs, that's kind of when the parents would do that kind of thing. Yeah. What if a student is thirsty during school day? Does school provide water after PE? If you look closely in the video, you'll see they're washing their hands with taps, but those taps can also, it's all the water across Japan is very clean, very safe, great drinking water. So they have their water bottles, which, wait, I have one. Something kind of like this, although kids probably have bigger ones than this. You fill it up and drink it. So you can pretty much get it any time of the day you want, I believe. Amber LHC. From the video you made, I noticed every kid gets the same food except the ones with allergies. My question is, do the older grades ones tend to get more food or quantity? Yeah, they do. Yeah, so if you're older, I think they size up the portions. Yeah. Misubao, or Misubao. Does all public schools have this Kyushoku quality? And every school has a nutritionist planning the weekly food, or just some private ones? Stay safe today. She said stay safe today because typhoon was coming. Yeah, we're all safe, at least in Tokyo. The quality definitely varies across the system. So I think Adachi Ward, they do have that Oishi Kyushoku program, which means tasty school program, lunch program. It's been going on for at least half a decade now, I believe. And I really thought it was tasty. Like, I wasn't making it up for the video. I was quite impressed with the food. And I've eaten a few other school lunches in other places, and I would say, yeah, the one that I filmed was the tastiest one. So, yeah, they don't all measure up equally. It really is dependent on the school or the region. As for private, this wasn't a private school. This was a public school. So it's more likely that public schools would have Kyushoku than private schools. Onigiri Kasan. Oh, so that's like, Onigiri Kasan is onigiri, like the rice ball, mother. What happens if a pupil totally dislikes a meal and can't eat it? They can't be forced to eat it, right? My husband had to drink all his milk at school, even if he hated it. He's Japanese and went to Japanese elementary school almost 40 years ago. Times were different back then. Yeah, 40 years ago. And my wife went back to school, way back when as well. And it was a lot stricter back then. Nowadays, it's more tolerant. And if you really didn't like something, I think it really depends. Like, if you actually have a lactose intolerance, you could probably get your medical certificate for that, and then that would solve that problem. If you didn't just like an ingredient, I think it's more like, here, try a little bit of this, try some more, like, let's cook it a different way. I think they try to work with the students to make sure they start to like the food. But as far as I know, they don't force you to eat everything. Sanki 123, do you think that the Kyushoku lunch style will ever leave Japan and be integrated to other countries? Love your videos, keep it up. Thank you. Okay, so that is a pretty big question, and I think the thing that I've heard from a lot of other people in, say, like UK or Canada, United States, saying that they just don't think it could be done, is because you have a diverse population and people with parents who grew up in different countries. So even if the kid was born in, say, Canada, I'll just use Canada as an example. The parents grew up in, say, like India, and the stuff they cook at home is just different and the stuff they ate at school is different than what they eat in Canada. Although when I go in Canada, when I went to school and when I saw my kids' schools, a lot of the kids would tend to bring a lot of the same type of typical Canadian stuff, like sandwiches was the number one lunch menu item that I saw when my kids were in school in Canada. So maybe it's not as big of a deal as you would think, but I think there is just this ingrained collectivism in Japan that works out in the favor for the school lunch program in the case of Japan, because everybody is thought to think about others and about what's best for the group, and to think kind of like to be the same is good, don't leave anyone out. So I think it's just easier to pull off a program like that in Japan. In Canada, I think there would be more issues with people. I mean, yeah, you have people for religious reasons, you have the moral reasons, you have just I want my kids to have the organic or non-GMO or, I don't know, whole foods or, whatever it is. There's so many different types of diets, and I think the reason the school program works quite well in Japan is because it's across the nation, right? So um, there's a certain sense of what is it? Scale. With scale, you get cost savings, right? I mean, you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every single school. Like, you have a roadmap, a model for what's being done across the nation, and the national government in Japan, they helped fund a good portion of the facilities to make sure all the schools across every single area, whether it's poor or rich, had like access to the same type of facilities. And so it's already like baked into the whole school system of Japan that it's the national government plays a lot bigger role than, say, in Canada, where it's either the territories or the provinces that run the school boards. So, and they have, I guess, a big enough population too, like 120, I was going to say 127 million, but maybe now it's 126 million, that you have enough people that you get those, say economies of scale built in, because the meals only cost like, in Canadian be like closer to $3. American, maybe it's like $2.50 or something like that. But I mean, honestly, for what you are getting, it's darn cheap. So, I mean, I wish they could bring it across. I know Jamie Oliver wanted to do something in the UK. But I think you would really have to have the people just agree on that you're going to have to give up some type of autonomy or control in order to have that. And is the population willing to do that? I don't know. It's a very good question. Very good question. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to ask questions in the future, follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that kind of social media stuff, or support on Patreon. All right, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Cheers.